So welcome everybody. I think this is the fourth installment to the Game Dev Squad's weekly community events where we each teach something that we kind of know a little about or just have done some research on. So with that being said, it's actually my turn to teach something today, which will be kind of fun. I am still kind of recovering from being a little sick, so I might sound a little raspy or I might cough out of nowhere. So I'm sorry about that. I'll try to mute myself when I'm doing that. But again, today we're going to be talking about the movie render queue in Unreal Engine 5 and how you can kind of utilize that to render out some of the things that you've been creating in Unreal Engine 5. I'll do like a little bit of a presentation at the beginning, talking a little bit about it and kind of how you can use it, setting it up, and then also, I'll do a little tiny demo on how to render out certain images. If you have some questions, please wait until the end, because that way we can get through it, and then we can always answer that at the end. Okay. So with that being said, we'll get started. So if you guys don't know who I am, I'm Adam Serhane. I've been teaching at College of Creative Studies for a long time now. I've also been teaching for a long time. I'm also a 3D artist over at Ford Motor Companies. It's been a lot of fun over there. I've been using Unreal Engine for a long time now. But I also like just kind of dabbling in a lot of different 3D things. So with that being said, let's just jump into learning about the movie render queue. So, boom. So what's the movie render queue? Well, the movie render queue is this really cool new beta software that is being used to render out and have a little bit more control over with the Unreal Engine, which is really cool. You can do a lot of extra things with it. You can choose how many output frames you have. You have a lot higher quality using anti-aliasing and dealing with motion blur and reducing a lot of that extra things, which is great. And the nice thing about this too is that we can actually set up a lot of batch renderers as well. Before it was a little harder to deal with that, but now it's a lot easier for artists to kind of wrap their head around this batch rendering system, which is really fun. And the nice thing about that is that it really just speeds up our workflow in getting really beautiful renders out of Unreal Engine as fast as we can. And the cool thing about it is that because Unreal is free, we don't have to worry about having any kind of paid software to render our images or render our things. So if you guys have used Blender or anything else like that, that's totally perfect in a way. So it's another option in why we want to use free software whenever we can, and if you can, or if you're on a tight budget, which is nice. Again, you can create some really pretty renders, doing some certain things out of it. The other big thing too is that because Unreal Engine is just recently came out with 5, there's been a lot more improvements to the lighting systems in the use of lumens and also the option of nanite, which allows us to really bring in really dense meshes, and you can just still run it at like a decent frame rate, which is really cool. So, and the nice thing about that is that now we can really just kind of focus more on the final product instead of a little bit more of the setup. You still need to know those ways that you need to prep your model and get them into the engine, but it's a little less of a burden now, which is nice. So just to kind of talk about this, how do you enable your movie render queue? Well, it's actually a plugin. So if you never have enabled any plugins in Unreal, then you just need to actually just go into window and then settings, and then you have your plugin settings, and you just search in for your movie render queue. When you do that, this allows you to activate or see it in the window, because if you don't have it activated, then it won't show up. It's super easy. You just go in, you type in movie render, you enable both of them, and just restart your system. It takes 2 seconds, then it'll override that, and you can see it in the window when you go to Window, Cinematics, Movie Render Queue. The next thing we need to do is this, and mind you guys, that this is something that we would do after we're done lighting our scene pretty much really well, having all of our models inside the inside of Unreal, and have everything set up like how we want it to. These are just some steps that you need to remember when you are getting to that next part when you're going to start rendering out. Okay. So after we set up our movie render queue, we want to set up our camera, right? We want to be able to have our camera. We bring out a cinematic camera. That's very important. I think in Unreal Engine 5, they've taken away the option to just have a camera actor. If you're still using 4, a lot of these things will apply. Just be mindful of how certain things will go through it. It might be a little different button looking, or it might just have to. They might have taken it away. So if you are in Unreal Engine 4, remember that to use a cinematic camera actor. Cinematic camera actor allows you to have a lot more camera settings, which is really good. So once you have that in there, you can start playing with your focus settings, your aperture, your focal length, and change, basically setting up your image to how you want to render this, which is really nice. After we have that, you want to make sure your post-processing volume is set up. Post-processing volume basically influences something in the environment with that whenever it's and allows you to change things like your exposure, your bloom, your reflections, your color grading, anything in that would be a post-processing effect, which is pretty cool. This allows us to enhance our movie render queue quite a bit, or our renders really well. The big thing to remember is that you want to make sure that you set your your volume box to infinite extends, because if it's not, then you actually have to go in and be within the volume to be able to see what the volume is doing. So some things to kind of work out is to kind of actually just go in and fix that is by setting to infinite extents, because then that will set up everything, or it'll show everywhere in your environment. Okay, so just be mindful of that if you had any problems with that. But yeah, this is a very powerful tool. It helps a lot with lighting. It helps a lot with ambient occlusion and anything else post-processing related. So another thing that really helps too is lights, right? So when you going in and you're starting to set up a lot of different lights, directional point lights, spotlights, rectangular lights, and skylights are very, very important when it comes to setting up in your environment. One thing that I do suggest you always have in your scene is a skylight. Skylights are very, very good because they simulate the bounce lighting within the environment. If you want a certain type of look, you can actually import your own HDRI. This allows you to kind of curate exactly how you want your scene to look, even though it doesn't have the right reflections within it. It allows you to get that lighting to make your prop look really cool or make your environment look pretty nice. Just remember, if you choose a different HDR, it's going to reflect a different HDR. So a cool thing that is out there in the wild, if you guys don't know what Polyhaven is, it used to be HDRI.com. But now it is Polyhaven. They have a lot of free assets, and all they do is take donations. It's a very good website because you can get a ton of really cool looking HDRs, and you can see a preview of them in the bottom right corner. So that's a really, really cool thing that they do, and you can customize to your heart's content, which is really nice. So big thing to remember is that you should at least have a skylight in your scene to get that bounce lighting to really make your things pop, which is really, really good. Okay. So be mindful of that. So after you set your lighting, we got to set up our level sequence. Okay. Again, a level sequence is basically an editor or a timeline where you can go in and start setting up keyframes or anything else to basically say like, hey, I want this camera here, and I want this camera to do this thing via keyframing, right? It's like a track editor. If you guys have ever used Premiere or After Effects, it's anything like that. You can stack certain things, which is really cool, and you can import different things into the sequencer itself, which is really nice. So the way I like to set up my sequencer shots now, after learning a little bit of tricks, is that I actually like to set up a sequence per shot, and then that will allow me to control what's in my shot. So if I have a certain lighting setup for that one angle, then I will have it all in that one sequencer, and then I'll tell the sequencer to spawn those actors there and then not spawn the other thing. Okay, so we'll go over how I set that up during the demo part. But this helps a lot because now that allows me to work within my means of like, okay, hey, this is my shot for this one, this is my shot for this guy, and then I can batch render like I was talking about. I don't have to keep rendering just per thing. So, which is really nice. Again, after you have your your sequence in there, you would go in and start setting up your camera. You're setting up your track. You're setting up your different cuts, right? Allows you to populate the sequencer with whatever you need, right? So if you have an animated path for your camera, this is a great time to add some keyframing data. The other nice thing about this is a way that I like to keep my shot or my location of my camera set is that whenever I make a sequence, I will always throw in my shot camera in there, and then I'll just do a really quick keyframe on my transformations at the 0. So just in case if I move my camera while I'm adjusting, I don't lose that shot that I've taken some time to really kind of push forward for, which is very important. That helps a lot. But again, if you have some camera tracking movement, if you have some different shots where you're going in and you want to get like a nice close up, or you want to do a rack focus of like your different, you have multiple things in the area where you want to change your focus of your distance, so you can get a little blurrier near you versus far away. You can set that up here, which is really cool. And that allows you to do, you basically have a lot of control on the numbers of your components here, right? So anything from like transformation, your aperture, your focal length, and even your focus distance, right? So, and again, remember this is a timeline, so per image or per tick is a frame, so that's how much it's going for, which is very interesting. So after that, we have to go into the movie render queue. Remember, you guys can go to it via by going to the Windows and then go to Cinematics and movie render queue. But this is where we're gonna start setting up our shots, right? When I see here, I have my shot 1, and when I have my sequencer, it will actually pull it up there. So what I need to do is I need to go in and actually change the settings. When I click on that unsaved configuration, this will bring me to this settings where I am allowed to go ahead and change them to my heart's content. Again, this allows me to change it from like if I need to do PNGs, if I need to add anti-aliasing, if I need to go in and start to change the output resolution, where this is being saved, what am I rendering per frame, am I doing it per step frame, what's my output resolution. Basically, it allows me to choose like whatever I need to and have that set up, which is really nice. The cool thing is that after we kind of play with these settings here, we can really go in and actually save it as a preset, which is really nice because now we don't have to go in and change all of that out every single time. So that's a really cool thing that happens because that saves time, and time is always against us. So we need to make sure that we save as much as we can. So saving a preset is really cool, and you can have a whole bunch of different presets, right? It's really sweet. So after that, you just go in and you set your render up, and you make a really cool render, right? So after all the lighting setups, we have this set up here. You hit the rendering, you just hit go, and you're ready to go, right? Which is really cool. This allows you to have your output frames and all those things, which is really great. So that's kind of like a basic overview. It'll be a lot more. You'll understand a lot more when we actually go through it. Those are just steps to remind you what's going on. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the things that are very important when not even just when you're using the movie render queue, but also just when you're using Unreal as its own tool. One of the best things ever you can do is actually going into the Epic documentation and actually reading what each thing does. So if you guys have a question about something, or like you don't know exactly what a setting does or why this is called something, you can literally Google Unreal documentation and whatever that thing is, and it'll pull it up, which is great because it saves you a lot of headache of understanding what's going on. You can take a deep dive of exactly what happens with that setting. They'll sometimes show you like comparisons of what uh, that setting will do for you. They also have sometimes settings that are like the most optimized that they've found within their testing, which is really cool. So please go into the Epic documentation. It's fantastic. It's really nice to kind of just dive deep into, and it's got a lot of cool learning resources, which is really sweet. The other big thing is that with the release of Unreal Engine 5, they've also talked a lot about this dev community, which is probably one of the coolest things I've seen in a long time. They really kind of revamped their development community to make it like this one-stop shop thing, which is really cool. So they have like announcements on the page. They have different showcases of people who've been making on it. But the cool thing is that they have their forums there, and they also have, so if you have a question or any Q&A stuff you can ask for, or you even want to help someone else out, you can ask them there. You can also learn a lot on here, which is really great. They have a lot of different, like how do you start on using Unreal, or how do you use this in gaming, or how do you do this for film and tech, TV. They have different learning paths, which is really nice. It's just a really cool thing because they've really revamped it from what it was before, and it's a nice thing to kind of utilize and really kind of get into the community and get noticed in a way, because a lot of people will see these showcases and be like, oh man, how did you do that? That looks amazing. And then you learn from each other, which is really great. So that's devepics.com/community. So definitely go check them out if you haven't yet. I have a bunch of different links here, which is really great. So if you guys want to take a look at those links. But with that, I'll just show you the dev community. There's a lot of really cool things you can go to. You can see this, which is really nice, and actually kind of see exactly what's going on. There's a lot of Q&A discussion. The nice thing about this is that you can actually copy and paste different code samples, so you can actually see what's going on, which is really nice. So it's very important. And then a really quick thing about Unreal Engine 5, they literally have like understanding the basics, working with the content, really like it's one of those things that's very important that a lot of people don't know that this is here, and it's really cool. So definitely take this out. It's really, really sweet. So with that being said, let's jump into, excuse me, Unreal. So I made like a really quick little tiny scene. I've got a couple. I've got shot 1. I haven't made shot 2 yet because I want to make that together. But I basically have this scene where I can go in and I can take a look at my shot 1, and this is what I have, right? Which is really cool. So, excuse me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and do some checks of what I'm going to render, right? So I have in this scene that I want to actually render this other blade that I've created in here, but I also want to render out this other shot that I have. So I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to start playing with my my lighting first, right? So now that I have this in here, I'm just going to really quickly go to my little plus button. I'm going to go to my lighting. I'm going to maybe create a point light. I'll just do a really quick like 3-point lighting system where I'll just go in here, groove this up, maybe play with the intensity a little bit, kind of see how that goes, move it around a little bit, play with the color a little bit. Maybe I want some more of an orange tint to it. So I'll hit that button up, which is nice. I'll make sure to name things because naming things is always important. I'm going to hit this and then do light _1 _ shot 2. And then I'll drop it into my shot 2 folder, right? Which is really cool. And then I'll just do the same thing and I'll just start moving things around and trying to get that nice looking render, right? Another great way to kind of see what's going on with your render shots is actually creating a camera and setting up your shot first. Or your composition first. So I don't want to use this camera because this is not what I'm using. I'm actually want to create a new camera. So if I plus this little quickly apply to the project, this will allows me to go to cinematics, cinematic camera actor. This plops my camera down here. You can see it's right here. I don't really see anything going on right now. So an easy way for me to do this is actually go clicking on this perspective button. And this will allow me to take over this camera. So when I take over this camera, I can move around and kind of move my shot where I need it to move, right? So what's the first thing we got to do? We got to name our camera, right? Because we don't want to have just cinematic camera actor 1. That's not good. If I hit the F2 key, it'll automatically lets me render. So I'll go shot _2 _ cam. And then I'll move this into my camera folder, which is great. So I have that turned off. I have my shot 2 camera. I'll start to move around my scene and try to get a cool shot, right? I want to maybe like this looks pretty fun. I'll start moving this up here, maybe get this a little bit. This I can start playing with some of my focal length. Maybe I want a higher focal length, so maybe I do like a 60 degree, and then I'll pull this back so I get a flatter image, right? Which is pretty sweet. So I'll do something like that. I'll move my camera around. You can kind of notice though it's very like blurry, right? Well, that's because we need to go in and set our focus settings, right? If we don't have that set, then we're going to get a blurry shot because right now it's really far away. So for us to do that, all we need to do is go on this little button right here, focus settings, and there's this focus method, right? A cool way of doing this is we actually have this eyedropper where we can actually choose the sample the scene depth, and then that will move our plane or our focus distance to wherever we click. But before I do that, I'm going to click on this draw debug focus plane. When I turn that on, I will actually see in the viewport where my focus is. So if I click on that, sample depth, excuse me, and I bring in that manual focus, and then I turn off that debug, right? Now I can see that my shot actually looks like it's supposed to, right? We've got it going in here, which is really sweet. Maybe if I want to, I can just turn this around, which is so much cooler. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's not. Yeah, I like that better. This is fun. Looks cool. But again, now it's in focus, which is nice. So I'm going to go back to my shot 2. I can start playing with some other settings if I want to. Remember, the big thing to remember, everybody, is that you don't really want to play with the post-processing down here because we want our global post-processing volume to control everything. And this will override anything you've got going on. So just allow you to control everything with your global post-processing volume here, which is perfect, which is cool. So we've got our shot. We've got everything here. Now we need to go in and start adjusting some more lights. So if I click on this button right here, this will pop me out of it. I can go in and I can start moving my lights around to my heart's content, right? So which will be really nice. So I can move this over here. If I hold Alt and I click off of this, I can pull this out here and make a copy. I'll maybe grab this and move this probably like really below here. And then maybe I'll change this to like a blue color because that would be fun. Get some nice blue color going. Maybe bring this intensity up more. Push this a little closer. Again, I'm going kind of fast. You'd spend a little bit more time setting up your lighting system in a way. So you've got everything looking really cool. Another big thing to remember is that you want to have reflection captures. If you don't have reflection captures, your reflections won't look good if you're using screen space stuff. So just make sure you have a couple of these in here. They're very cheap to use, which is nice. You'll get these unbuilt things right here. So you got to make sure that that's all set up there. Oops, I'm going to set these to movable too, just to make sure things are okay. So if you get that up there, all you need to do is go to build, and then you can go to build reflection captures. Boom. That should build it out, which is really nice. So we've got our lighting setup system. We've got this going. Maybe we want to bring this up a little bit more. Our skylight. 0.4. That looks pretty decent. So we have everything here. We have our things set up. Let's go in and let's set up our sequencer. Okay. So the way we can create a sequencer is it's actually pretty easy. We just click on this little display list of level sequences, and I can hit add level sequence. So I'm going to navigate to where I'm saving all my shots, and I'm going to basically click on, well, I won't click on here. You would make your own sequence. I'm not going to make another one. But here's my my level, shot 2, right? Here, let me just delete this. I'm going to name it shot 2, save it here, and you can see now that I have both shot 1 and shot 2 in here, which is very important. Okay. Let's set up shot 1 first. If I go here and I'm going to open this up, and then this way I can kind of like see what's going on, which is really cool. So first thing I need to do, I'm going to bring in my shot 1 camera, right? I'm going to make sure I'm in here. I'm going to first off set a transformation keyframe so I don't lose this position. just in case. Make sure that I have this here. I'm in the right position. I'm going to hit that keyframe. The next thing you have to remember is that this is your timeline. And right now, my timeline is set to render basically 150 frames. I don't need that. So I'm just going to bring this down. And I usually like to leave it at 5 because sometimes we need to let something spin up before they can get going. So if you guys have like animated particles, or if you have anything else like that, or things that are going to be rendering out differently, you need to have some spin up time. So I just have 0 to 5. That's a good setting. It's not too bad. It's just because we have a still shot. If you have an animated shot, it's always good to have a little bit of warm up frames. There's actually some settings that you can do to change that out too, which is really nice. So I have this set up here, which is great. The next thing we need to do is we actually need to load our plugin for the movie render queue. Okay. So if I go to my edit and I go to plugins here, this will allow me to search for my plugins. So if I go to movie, render, and these should pop up. If you don't have them on, they'll be checked off. You just need to check both of these on, and then they'll be in here. You just have to restart your settings, which will be great. What that allows us to do now is that we can either go to the movie render queue from Cinematics movie render queue, or the button right here is render this movie to video. If you didn't have the movie render queue set up, it'll actually give you the movie render sequence, which is a little. You can still do that. It's just not as much control how we want to. Okay, which is important. So we have the movie render queue set up. We have our first shot kind of set up. What I want to do is I'm actually going to set up both my shots with my lighting that I need to. Okay. So, whenever you have everything in the scene, it's always going to render no matter if you have this on or off, right? So technically, if I were to go in and I start to render everything, it's going to have all these in the scenes and it's going to look really weird. So for the way for us to do that or fix it is we're actually going to put everything into shot 1 that we don't want to render, and then have that turn on and off. Okay? So the cool thing about that is we actually can grab everything from shot 2, so that means my dagger, my lights in here, drag it in this track here. See how everything's set up now? We can press this button called track, and then we can do an actor hidden in game. When you have that turned on, you can turn off all the visibility, which is really important because when we start to turn off that visibility, you can see that the lights are going away and also our things going away, which is perfect, right? So now that we have that set up, we're going to go in, not delete it, we're going to get out of that shot 1, and now we're going to go into shot 2, and we're going to do the same thing, but vice versa. So first off, I'm going to make sure I'm in shot 2 camera. I'm going to bring in my shot 2 camera. I'm going to change my output to like 5 frames. I'm going to go in and I'm going to keyframe my shot 2 camera just in case. And then after I have that, I'm going to just bring this little bar down to kind of see what's going on. I'm going to grab everything in shot 1, bring it here. Now with everything selected, remember that's very important because this is by name as being for the track, so you got to be careful of that. I'm going to click on the little track button. I'm going to add a properties called actor hidden in game. And now I'm going to turn off everything that I don't want to see in this shot. Okay? So the cool thing about this now is that when I go into each of these shots, right, if I go in here, you can see now, and I go into this camera shot, you can see that this one's gone. And if I go into shot 2, and I go to this camera, you can see that one's gone now too, which is perfect. So you just got to be very careful because if you don't have that set up, it won't allow you to batch render or get some really cool quick renders, which is nice. So again, that's why setting up everything within these folders so you know what to turn on and off. It gets a little complicated when you have like 3 or 4 different shots you want to take because you'll have to go in and start adding different sequences per each shot and removing certain things. So just be mindful of that workflow. it might be okay to have one lighting set up and then have that be your thing and then go for it. But if you have different things you want to render and batch render, it's very important. So we have everything set up now, right? We have our lighting set up, we have our shots set up, we have our models set up how we want them to be. Now what we need to do is we need to go in and actually start rendering things out, right? So I'm going to go to a window, cinematic, movie render queue, boom. And now you can see if you have something in here, it might have this, but I'm going to hit delete. This is what it would normally look like. So what I need to do is I just need to add both of my shots in here. First, I'm going to hit save all just in case. Let's just go to, that's good. I'll save everything just in case it randomly explodes. I'm going to hit the little render button, and I'm going to add my sequencers, or my sequence, my level sequence. So I'm going to hit the shot 1, and I'm going to add shot 2, right? Now, you can see that this is being shot here. These are the different levels that we've got going on. These are my settings and where my output's being driven, right? So what I need to do is I need to go into this unsaved configuration here. What this will allow me to do is this will allow me to go into my settings of the movie render queue, and then I can start adding different things. It's a little weird because the way you do this is by clicking on the settings button and then choosing different things to kind of slot in. So when I click on the settings button, I can go in and I can just go to like PNGs. I'm going to have a PNG. I don't want to render out a JPEG, so I'm just going to hit delete. Maybe I want to have some anti-aliasing, right? I'll have that set up there. When I click on each one of these, this will allow you to kind of just see what each one does, right? So very basic. We can go through this, and I'll probably leave it at this. If you want to get a little bit more advanced, there are some console variables that you can add yourself. Unreal has got a really good. Oops, I don't have it up right now. But Unreal has a lot of console variables that you can set yourself that will actually change the render to make it look a lot better. But that takes longer to render, so you just got to be careful. And it takes a little bit of like copying and pasting things. So if you want to go more advanced, look up movie render queue in the console variables, and it's really cool. So I'm just going to delete that for right now. So I'm going to hit this PNG sequence. This looks pretty cool. Deferred render, that's good. Anti-aliasing. I'm actually going to hit the override anti-aliasing. And I'm going to change this to 64. Okay, so what that'll do is it'll render out like 64 images and then splice them together. This works. This is really good for anything that's moving and you have motion blur. So mind you, you can leave these settings here. You saw that if I had this set to 1, it gave me a little like hey, what are you doing? Temporarily use at least 8 samples, increase the samples count up to match this. So if I just leave it at 8, it'll be okay. So you want to kind of like set that at least 8, but 64 is really good. If we let's see what happens. Yeah, so 64 is a good setup. It just takes a little bit longer to render. You can always choose different things out here. So I'm just going to leave it at 8 for right now. That's an easy render to go. The other big thing is our output path. Okay. Output path basically shows where our output of our render is. So output directory, this will allow us to choose where we want it to go. So I'm just going to select the desktop. This is our file format name. You can go in and start changing the name, what's going on. You can change the different frame numbers if you need to. So I'm going to get rid of the sequence name. I'm going to leave this dot frame number thing, which is pretty cool. So I'll just do, or maybe I'll just do render _1. That's good. Our output resolution, you can go in and start typing what resolution you want. Remember to try to keep this within how you want it to be rendered. The bigger you make this number, the longer it's going to take. So be mindful of that. And you can choose different, like if you're rendering out a bunch of different frames, then you can choose a different custom frame rate or anything else. There's a lot of different advanced stuff that you can do, but the big things you want to remember on this output path is this output directory, the file format, and the output resolution. And then also, if you're going to be using a custom playback frames, you can have the start frame. I'm just going to make this like 3 and 4, so that'll be okay. You can just leave it as is, but remember you'll be rendering 5 images as it goes, so you can do that. There's some other advanced stuff here. You can see the custom frame ending. I think there's some padding in here, which gets a little crazy. So which is cool. So I'm just gonna let this. I'm just gonna hit accept. Before I actually hit accept, I'm actually gonna save this as a preset. So if I click on this little button right here, save as preset, and then I'll choose where I want this to be. So I'll just go in here and I'll type in 1080p, right? 1080p render. Or I'll just do prop render. Something to name it nice and cool. So the nice thing about that now is that I will always have this in this file or this project. So now if I hit accept, you can see here it changed to prop render. I can actually go here and just choose that without even having to worry about anything else, right? Which is very important. So maybe if I go really fast, I don't want to overwrite. I'm going to go back and not overwrite just in case. So now we have both the shot 1, we have the shot 2. I'm going to hit render local. You can see it takes a little bit to render. We've got that going on. If I go to my files directory and I go to my desktop and I open up my files, so now you can see that I have this shot and I also have this shot, which is really nice, which is really cool. I can take a look at what's going on. You can batch this up. You can change some of the renders out there or anything else in there, and then you can just hit render again if you need to. Maybe we need to move this around and get a better angle, so I can go in to shot 1. I can turn off my shot 2 because I don't need that for right now. Maybe I want to move this over here, push this back. I need to be a little bit further out. That looks great. Hit a render local again. And as you can see, now my shot was rendered out. My focus is all messed up now, but you can see like how fast, even though it takes a little bit of time to kind of set yourself up to get this going, it helps a lot when you're trying to make multiple different renders to kind of go for it out there, which is really cool. So that's just kind of like a little bare bones, a quick jump into the movie render queue. I hope you guys learned something from here. It's really cool. It's a very powerful tool. One thing I will say is if we go back to here, there's a YouTuber who's really, really good at just basically explaining a lot of this stuff. His name is, I don't want this guy right here. If you guys haven't known him, you should definitely go take a look at his YouTube. He has got some amazing tutorials on a lot of different things, showcasing a lot of new information. William is a great person when he kind of just showcases a lot of different things. Look, you can learn a lot from him, which is really cool. So definitely check his YouTube out. He has saved me quite a bit of time, which is great. But yeah, other than that, that's basically it for the movie render queue. Hopefully you guys learned something, and yeah, if you guys have any questions, let me know.